Today's tutorial is for the brand new pattern from Backstitch and Baste. This is the Booksie. Now this pattern comes in several different sizes and also several different options. Today I'm going to be sewing up the 3 different sizes. The largest size is for an actual book. The middle size and the smaller size are designed for e-readers. Not only do you get the 3 different sizes in this pattern, but you also get a couple of different options for the way you want your Booksie to look. The simplest version would be if you just have one piece for your front and your back. There's also a version where you can have a left or right vertical piece as a contrast. For mine, I'm going to do the version that has the top band as a contrast print. This pattern is going to come together really quick. So what I will do is I will sew one of these on camera and then sew the other 2 off camera. And at the end of the tutorial, we'll do a size comparison. The print I'm using is a cotton woven. This is from the Emporium. My vinyl was just some vinyl that I had in my stash. The only interfacing that I have on these pieces currently is just on the cotton woven pieces. I have a layer of SF101. And on each of these flap pieces, I have a layer of Sew Fuse Plus that I kept out of the seam allowance. After I sew up the front and the back, I do plan to put a layer of Thermolan on each of those, keeping that out of the seam allowance as well. My thread is going to be Fairy Floss from Wizardry, and I'm probably going to add some tags from Heartwood and Hide. To get this pattern started, I'm going to go ahead and decide if I'm adding tags. If I am, I'm going to sew them all on. And I'm also going to mark the placements and install magnetic snaps. If you're using a snap like a riveted snap or a cam snap that can go through both layers, you can wait until after you sew the flap together. I'm choosing to use prong magnetic snaps, so I need to install mine now. To get this pattern started, the first thing I did was I did sew on tags to the middle portion of the cotton woven. The second thing I did was I added magnetic snaps to each one of the versions using the prong magnetic snaps. I did not attach them to the top band yet because I want to wait until after that's sewn up and I add the extra stabilizer onto it. So now the next thing to do is to take these 2 flat pieces, place them right sides together, and then we're going to sew them with the seam allowance given the pattern. We will start here at the top, backstitch, go down, and then across the bottom, back up the other side. We will not sew across the top because that's how we will turn it. To trim the bulk off of these corners, what I do is I just kind of do an angle down, and I kind of keep it rounded so it's not too sharp. Same thing around here. This is how my flap looks. This is going to be the exterior. Of course, that'll be the lining. I'm actually going to top stitch it from this side, even though the magnetic snaps will be a little bit of an inconvenience on the bottom. I just want to really make sure I get a nice top stitch on the exterior part since it'll kind of be the feature of the bag. I will go ahead and baste that closed since I don't need it open anymore. My top stitching is always done about 1/8 of an inch away. After you have the flap completed, go ahead and set it aside while we work on the rest of the exterior. Since I'm doing the version with the top band, I have my middle pieces and my top pieces. You may not have this depending on the version you are going to do. So what you'll do is you'll take one of these, you'll have one for the front and the back. If your print is directional, make sure it is going in the right direction. We will take the top band, simply flip it down. We are going to sew this together with the seam allowance given the pattern. Now let's just go ahead and backstitch when we start and stop and go all the way across here. The pattern tells us to just flip this up, keeping your seam up, and then you will just finger press this in place and top stitch all along here. I really want to butterfly this seam, so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to finger press this open and top stitch on both sides. I just want to spread a little bit of that bulk out where I am working with vinyl, and I just like the way it looks when I have a double row of top stitching. So when I'm top stitching, whichever way you do it, you're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch away from the edge you just sewn. This is the way my front looks. Yours may be all one piece, or yours could have a vertical contrast piece instead of the top band. What I'm going to do now is I want to do those same steps for the other 2 pieces to create the back. Also, the pattern gives you the measurements as to what this piece should be after you do any kind of stitching together of different pieces, just to make for sure that everything is correct and you don't get thrown off too much since you're adding different components together. So now that we have the front and the back completed, we're going to pull out that bottom, that base piece, and we're simply going to take it and place them right sides together. We're going to match up that bottom edge, and then we're going to sew across here with the seam allowance given the pattern. Once you have those sewn together, you are going to top stitch. Again, I'm going to choose to top stitch by butterflying my seam open and top stitching on both sides. That is not necessary though, just a personal preference with looks. When you top stitch, you're going to do about 1/8 of an inch away from that folded edge that you just sewed. What you are going to do now is you're going to take that back piece and do the same thing. Here's my back. I'm going to attach that base to this bottom by placing them right sides together, lining them up against the unsewn edge of that bottom base piece, and sewing with the same seam allowance. I'm going to once again butterfly that seam by finger pressing it open first and top stitching 1/8 of an inch away on each side. And at this point, your exterior is done, and so I'm going to go off camera and add the interfacing to this piece. I will be using Thermolan on mine, and just as a note, the designer does have you interface these pieces individually. I'm just choosing to be a little lazy and do it all at one time. Since I'm making all 3 sizes, I just wanted to save myself a little bit of extra time there. Exterior completely done. I went ahead and attached the snaps to the outside at the top. I just clipped on the flap just to make sure everything fit, and it does. I did go ahead and add a layer of Thermolan, kept it out of the seam allowance. I have been showing you all the steps for this pattern on the large version, the Booksie, but I forgot to show you how to add the flap, and I added mine on the end. I'll show you how that one looks because I'm sewing them all together. So you can see I did get mine added on there, but I forgot to show you how to do it. So I just wanted to cut this clip in with this smaller version. This is the mini one. And just want to show you that. So what I do is, the pattern gives you measurements and things, but what I do is I just clip it on that magnet. So it's already clipped. And then I pull it right sides together. And I make sure those sides line up. So you can see how the sides are even. And then I just pull it until that flap is against that raw edge. And then I'm just going to add some clips there. And that way I know I have it perfect. I know it's going to fit really nice and I won't have any issues there. So that is the way I do it. I was just going to show you that. So then I unclip, and the way, just so we go through it verbally, it is going on the back side. It is centered. The flap is lining side up. So you're looking at your snaps. 2 ways of doing it, but both will give you the same result. Now I'm just going to baste this in place with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all along the top. And now we'll go back to the other version where I show you how to sew up the sides on the bigger version, the Booksie. The next thing I need to do is just to fold this right sides together, and I'm going to sew down each of these sides with the seam allowance given in the pattern. I'm going to start at the top and go all the way down to the bottom, making sure I backstitch when I start and stop. I'm not, of course, going to do anything here at the top. It'll stay unsewn. That will be the opening of the bag. Also, while off camera, I laid this piece on my cutting mat. Just check to make sure that my edges were not too off. A couple places I trimmed up with my rotary cutter just to make sure everything looked good so I could get a nice sew here at the end. I'm going to box the corners now at the end, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a marker and I'm just going to make a mark so that I can tell where the center is. This is a little bit different way that some people do box corners, but it is the way the designer always does her box corners, and it's really a unique way to do it. I like it a lot, actually. I think it is a time saver for sure. After I have that marked, I'm just going to kind of trim a diagonal. Make sure I don't cut into my stitches. I will do that on both sides. There's not really any kind of measurement you need to go with there on that. It's just a little diagonal piece you cut off. What I do then is I'm going to open up that seam and I'm going to push this line, that's the center mark, and my seam, I want to push them together so that they are flush, and then I can sew across that with the seam allowance given in the pattern. So you can see they're just pushing and laying on top of each other. Really an easy way to do a box corner. Saves you a little bit of time for sure. Such a unique way to do it, I think. So now I'm going to sew across here, and I am going to do the same thing on the other side. You'll have that overhang you'll need to trim off, so you'll just trim off a little bit there. And so that's how the box corner looks. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. For the lining pieces, all you do is you take your two lining pieces, you place them right sides together. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sewing here at the top. I'm going to backstitch, use that seam allowance, come all the way down to the bottom, and then cut over, pivot. If you need to draw on your seam allowance, you can, but pivot and then backstitch here to leave an opening at the bottom of the lining. So I'll break my stitches here, then start back sewing here, pivot, go all the way up, leaving my top unsewn. This is the same step for all the sizes. There's no difference here. So that's how the lining looks. Now on this one, whenever I'm boxing my corners, I don't need to draw along the bottom here to mark the center because the seam is the center. So what I do is you can go ahead and trim up the edges just like you did on the exterior, but I just do it this way. I put my hand in, and then I press these two seams. It's going to look really weird when you have it because you'll have these hanging off. You can trim them off if it bothers you, but you just want to feel so that that seam, both of the seams are on top of each other. And then just sew across there with the seam allowance given the pattern. And then when you trim that off, you can see you just have that perfect boxed corner there. So that is how you'll do the lining. You'll repeat those same steps on the other side, and it'll be the same for each version you make. I went ahead and turned my exterior right sides out, but I left my lining wrong sides out. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to put that exterior into the lining, and then we're going to sew around the perimeter. We're going to make sure that we keep that flap tucked in there so that we can sew it the right way. We'll match up the seams, and then we'll clip all around the perimeter, and then we'll just sew with that seam allowance given in the pattern. I'm butterflying my seams open. The reason why I'm choosing to butterfly instead of nest is because there is a different thickness with the vinyl compared to the cotton woven. If they were the same thickness, I wouldn't care to just nest them, but for this way, I definitely feel like butterflying is the best option. Now that I have that sewn all around the top, I'm not trimming the seam allowance. I'm just going to go down to the bottom and start pulling this exterior out slowly. Once I get that pulled out, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to push that lining in, and then I'm going to turn this whole thing wrong sides out. I want to top stitch along the perimeter before I close up the opening in the lining. And for me, I want to top stitch it on the exterior side. I'm not the best at top stitching, and so I know that I'll get a better finish if I do it from this exterior. So right now you can see that from this side, that lining is up a little bit further than the exterior. You can see it creeping up over the exterior on this side. I don't want that. So what I do is I just kind of hold the lining and pull it down while lifting the exterior up a little bit. I just want it a little bit higher. Doesn't have to be a lot, just a little. So you can see now I got about 1/8 of an inch. That's perfect for me. I don't need it too much. I just don't want to see any of the lining whenever I'm looking at the outside of the bag. Now it's time to top stitch. When I top stitch, I'm going to start here at the back where the flap is. I'm going to have the flap lifted up. I'm going to try to make sure I roll that seam down and I can feel it being flat there. And then I'm just going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch away. You can leave your threads long here and tie them, but I'm just going to back stitch. I'm going to be top stitching all the way around this perimeter, just going 1/8 of an inch away. When you get to the seams, they're a little bulky, so go ahead and make sure you finger press them flat. Go slow. And then lots of times what I like to do, if I'm afraid I'll get a skip stitch, is I'll go ahead and do one small back stitch there to kind of help. Now that I have that top stitch all the way around, I'm going to flip the entire thing right sides out. And now I'll pull out that lining and just close up that pocket. I'm just tucking those raw edges in, and then I'm just going to sew about 1/8 of an inch away all along that bottom seam. Once you get that pocket done, push it down inside, and then I put my hands in and I really push in those bottom corners to really get it to sit in there nicely. I go ahead and I close the flap. And then usually what I'll do is I'll put clips on the sides here. Let me show you what I'm talking about, just to get that seam compressed. You see how that's thick? I will just put that in there and it'll compress it overnight to kind of teach that vinyl the way I want it to lay. And you can see it doing it already. Look at how much lighter it looks. I can also do that at the top if I feel like it needs a little bit with the flap as well. So this is the large Booksie. I'll take these clips off in just a minute and we'll look inside it. But this is the large. This is for the actual physical books. Let me pull out the other sizes. I've had these clipped as well. Take off the clips on them. And these are designed for the e-readers, although some books could actually fit in these as well. This is the medium size and this is the mini. Let's go ahead. Let me change my camera angle so we can get a little bit better view. I'm going to try to hold all these up just so you can see them for just a minute. But this is the size difference. You can see there's quite a bit of size difference on them. As far as the width, it's not too big, but the height is definitely much bigger. So let's look inside each one of these. You can open them up and just see it's a really nice open pocket inside there. Let me get the large. So very nice size on these. Very quick to come together. I think these are going to make amazing Christmas gifts. You can make one of these in a print that the recipient would enjoy or care about, and then put in one of their favorite books or a new book by their favorite author. And I think that's just a wonderful gift. Very meaningful, but won't require a lot of effort or money on your part. So this pattern is from Backstitch and Baste. This is her brand new pattern. You get through all 3 sizes and the different versions. The top band is only one of the versions in there. It is her latest pattern, and I will have the link for this pattern in my description. The print is a cotton woven. This is all from the Emporium. And I will have the link for it as well. My tags are all from Heartwood and Hyde. And this is another beautiful pattern, and another one that gets me a little bit closer to getting all my Christmas makes done. I'm trying to get my Christmas sews in early and also do show prep, and this one could go for either way. This is a great pattern that you could batch so quickly. I don't think it takes a lot of effort, and it definitely doesn't take a lot of materials either. Thank you so much for watching another tutorial of mine, and I hope today in your sewing room that you're able to sew something up that just helps foster your love of reading. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day.